The rain came down in endless sheets, blurring the line between the sky and the soaked asphalt. A lonely stretch of highway stretched for miles in every direction, silent except for the steady rhythm of raindrops on metal. A black sedan sat motionless on the side of the road, hazard lights blinking weakly in the storm. Inside, Li Na, a young Chinese woman in her late 20s, sat clutching the steering wheel, her heart pounding with frustration and fear. She had been driving for hours after her GPS sent her through the back roads of rural America, a mistake she now regretted deeply. The storm had rolled in quickly, and then, as if to make things worse, her car's engine began to smoke. She had pulled over, tried calling for help, but her phone showed no signal. The unfamiliar silence around her made the isolation feel heavier. "Of all days," she whispered, voice trembling. This trip was important. Her meeting in the city could determine the future of her family's small company back home in Beijing. She couldn't afford delays. Yet here she was, stranded in the middle of nowhere, the cold rain beginning to seep through her thin jacket. Then, faintly at first, she heard the low rumble of an approaching engine. Headlights cut through the storm, and a rusty old pickup truck came into view. Her heart raced, relief mixed with a flicker of fear. In a foreign land, alone, she had no idea who was coming toward her. The truck stopped beside her car, and the door creaked open. A tall man stepped out, pulling the hood of his jacket tighter against the rain. His hands were rough and grease-stained, his face weathered but kind. "You all right, ma'am?" he called out over the rain. His voice was deep, calm, the kind that made people trust him. Li Na hesitated, then nodded. "My car broken." Smoke came out. Ethan, she would soon learn his name, gave her a reassuring smile. "Let's take a look." Without another word, he grabbed a toolbox from his truck and leaned under her hood. Rain poured over his shoulders, but he didn't seem to care. His movements were confident, practiced. Within minutes, he diagnosed the problem, a broken radiator hose. When he looked up, Li Na was watching him with wide, grateful eyes. "You're lucky," he said, smiling softly. "I can fix this enough to get you back on the road." And in that storm, between two strangers from opposite worlds, a quiet connection began, fragile, unexpected, but real. Ethan's garage sat on the edge of a sleepy American town, the kind of place where time seemed to move slower, where everyone knew each other's name, and where the faint scent of oil and rust lingered in the air like a memory. When Li Na stepped inside, dripping from the rain, the warmth of the space wrapped around her like a blanket. A small heater buzzed in the corner, and an old radio played a country tune from decades ago. Ethan set his toolbox on the workbench, his movements calm and practiced. "You can wait here," he said, nodding toward an old chair near the counter. "It's warm. Coffee's over there if you'd like some." Li Na nodded politely, unsure how to express her gratitude. Her English was good, but emotions were harder to translate. She poured herself a cup of coffee, the steam fogging her glasses. "Thank you," she said softly. Ethan smiled, tightening a bolt under the hood. "No problem. You're not from around here, huh?" She shook her head. "Beijing? I come for work, but..." She paused, searching for the words. "Everything here feels far away." Ethan chuckled, glancing up at her. "Yeah, this town's about as far away from Beijing as you can get." His voice was warm, teasing in a gentle way that made her smile for the first time that day. As the minutes passed, the sound of tools clinking and rain tapping against the windows filled the silence. Li Na watched Ethan work, his movements sure and steady, his expression focused but peaceful. There was something deeply comforting about his presence, a quiet strength that made her forget for a moment how lost she had felt. Finally, he stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. "There," he said with satisfaction. "The radiator hose was cracked, but I replaced it. Should run fine now." Li Na immediately reached into her purse. "How much?" she asked. Ethan shook his head firmly. "No charge. You've had a rough day. Just drive safe, all right?" Her eyes widened. "No, I must pay. It's only fair." He gave her a small smile. "Fairness isn't everything. Sometimes kindness is." Li Na stared at him, speechless. No one had ever refused money for help, not in her world. Something inside her shifted then, a feeling she couldn't quite name. As she left the garage, the rain had stopped. But inside her heart, something new had just begun. a quiet warmth that refused to fade. Morning sunlight spilled through the garage windows, turning the lingering raindrops into tiny jewels on the dusty glass. The storm had passed, leaving the air fresh and still. Lena stood beside her repaired car, her small suitcase resting on the pavement. She was ready to leave, yet her heart felt strangely heavy. Ethan stood nearby, wiping his hands on a rag, that same easy smile on his face, the kind that said he didn't expect anything in return. "Car's running good now," he said simply. "You'll make it to the city just fine." Lena nodded, but she didn't move. For a moment, neither spoke, the silence between them filled only by the sound of a distant crow and the soft hum of morning traffic. She wanted to say something meaningful, to thank him in a way words could never capture, but all she managed was a small, "You are very kind, Ethan." He shrugged with modesty, just doing what anyone would. But she knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would stop in the rain for a stranger. Not everyone would refuse payment. There was something about him, a quiet decency that reminded her of a time before life became complicated, when people helped simply because they could. Finally, she forced a smile. "Maybe we meet again someday." "Maybe," he said, eyes crinkling with warmth. "The world's smaller than it seems." As she drove away, Lena kept glancing at the rearview mirror. Ethan's figure grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared completely. Yet even miles down the road, her chest felt tight, her thoughts circling back to him. His calm voice, his selfless hands, his laughter echoing faintly in her memory. That night in her hotel room, she couldn't sleep. She looked at the city lights outside the window, dazzling, cold, and distant, and realized something strange. She had met hundreds of people in her travels, powerful and polished, but none had left such a deep mark on her as that small-town mechanic with grease on his fingers and kindness in his eyes. 3 days later, she turned her car around. When Ethan saw her pull up in front of his garage again, disbelief flickered across his face. "I thought you'd be halfway to New York by now," he said, half smiling. Lena held out a small red envelope, a Chinese symbol of gratitude. "Business can wait," she said softly. "I came to say thank you. Properly." And for a moment, standing there in the golden light, it felt as if time itself had stopped, waiting for something neither of them yet understood. A year had slipped quietly by since that rainy afternoon. Seasons changed, and so did life in the small town. Ethan's garage still stood on the corner of Main Street, but time hadn't been kind to it. Business had slowed, bills piled up, and he found himself wondering if kindness alone could keep the doors open. Yet every morning he came in just the same, fixing old engines, offering discounts to struggling neighbors, smiling even when the weight of uncertainty sat heavy on his shoulders. That evening, the sky was painted gold and pink as the sun began to set. Ethan swept the dusty floor, lost in thought, when the deep purr of a luxury car pulled up outside. He frowned. Cars like that didn't belong in this part of town. When the door opened, his broom slipped from his hand. Lena stepped out, dressed elegantly in a white coat, her smile the same as he remembered. "Lena?" he asked, disbelief thick in his voice. "I told you our story wasn't over," she said gently. Her accent was the same, her warmth unchanged, but there was new confidence in her eyes, the look of someone who had found her purpose. He wiped his hands nervously on his work pants. I didn't expect to see you again." She walked closer, her heels clicking softly against the concrete. "You helped me when I was lost," she said. "You didn't know who I was, but you helped anyway. That stayed with me." Ethan looked away, his throat tightening. "You didn't have to come all this way just to say that." She smiled and handed him a folder, an official-looking document stamped with her company's logo. "It's a partnership offer," she explained. "My company is expanding into the U.S. We need someone to manage our new auto division, someone honest, skilled, and good-hearted. Someone like you." Ethan blinked in disbelief. "Lena, I'm just a mechanic." "You're much more than that," she said softly. "You're proof that kindness still exists in this world." For a long moment, neither spoke. The sound of crickets filled the air as the sun dipped below the horizon. Then Ethan finally smiled, a deep, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Guess it's true," he said quietly. "Kindness really does come full circle." Lena smiled back. No, Ethan, she whispered. Kindness never ends, it just finds its way home. And as the twilight wrapped around them, it was clear. Their story had only just begun.